Hello, everyone. Welcome back to POV. Today, I'm sitting down with Dick Polman, a full-time writer-in-residence and journalism professor here at Penn. He also wrote for the Philadelphia Inquirer for 22 years and now writes about politics weekly on his own platform, dickpolman.net. You wrote for the Philadelphia Inquirer, like I said, for 22 years, covering the presidential elections of 1992, 96, 2000, 2004, and 2008. How do you view Pennsylvania as a swing state in this year's presidential election compared to past elections?
Yeah, it's become much more of a swing state than it used to be, in part because the divide between the blue Philadelphia and the red rural areas has become much more pronounced, number one. And the second thing is that the suburban counties around Philadelphia, they used to be solidly Republican. But starting about 20 years ago or so, they started to move toward the Democrats. And the reason in part was about social issues. And if you know Pennsylvania at all, you've got the metropolitan and suburban areas around Philadelphia, and to the west, you've got Pittsburgh. And everything in between, what was often called the T, geographically, has been Republican. And there was still around, a Democratic strategist named James Carville. He used to say about Pennsylvania that you've got Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, and in the middle is Alabama. And that was a reference to the votes that were just not gettable for the Democrats. So the sum total of all this is that when you add up all the demographics and all the votes, it becomes almost like a toss-up. And so the last election, Biden won it very narrowly, I don't know, 70,000 votes, 80,000 votes perhaps. And in 2016, Trump won it very narrowly. And so it used to be predominantly Republican, then it was voting Democratic for about 20 years. And then now it's the last two elections, it's swung both ways. So it has made it ground zero for these two candidates. And it's like they say that no matter who loses Pennsylvania, that candidate has much less of a chance of prevailing nationally.
Wow. In 2016, you wrote that, quote, Trump's dissing of democracy will live in infamy, and that he was a clear and present danger to our democratic values. What specifically did you observe about Trump 8 years ago that led you to make this claim far before January 6th?
It's not necessarily that I was, prescient before anybody else, but it was just so. It was just so, yeah, right. It was just so obvious to me by what I was seeing, and I think the two main things that I saw was that before the 2016 election even happened, he was saying that he wasn't necessarily going to accept the results of the campaign. I mean, he's never been shy about saying exactly what he intends to do and how he intends to respond. So in one of the debates that fall with Hillary Clinton, the question was asked, are you going to abide by the results of the election if you lose? And he said, well, not necessarily. Stay tuned. We'll see what happens.
Tonight, do you make the same commitment that you will absolutely, sir, that you will absolutely accept the result of this election?
I will look at it at the time. I'm not looking at anything now. I'll look at it at the time.
And that was at that time an extraordinary thing to say. I mean, my jaw dropped because I was still looking at things the way things have always been traditionally done. Of course you're going to abide by it. But so he said that. And the other thing he said during those same debates was that if he won, he might want to prosecute Hillary Clinton. And there was some line that in one of the debates that, you're going to be in jail, or you should be in jail.
Just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Yeah, because you'd be in jail.
Secretary.
So he was signaling this whole notion of you're going to prosecute your political enemies. And nobody had ever talked that way before. Those were the two main things that led me to write those things, is clear and present danger. And I lament the fact that they have now been borne out by reality.
Yeah. And what do you think will happen if Trump loses in November?
If he loses in November, we have a very high probability, I should say, of more post-election chaos. whether it's organized or spontaneous. If we look to see what happened in 2020, what does it say on the National Archives building? What's past is prologue. And he already did that in 2020. He lost 60 court cases, but it didn't seem to matter. And everybody, the last resort was to have this insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th. But my fear is that November could be just as, this would be the nice word for it, just as raucous as it was in 2020.
Right. In response to recent news coming out about Trump sending Vladimir Putin COVID tests in 2020 during the shortage, you posted on X saying that these reports, quote, would be an electoral game changer in a normal country. What do you mean by this claim in normal country?
Well, a normal country where a normal country where if you have a president who is taking steps to help a foreign adversary as opposed to helping your own citizens, a normal country would find that to be highly problematical at the very least. But if you notice, this report came out 2 days ago. It's been in the press a little bit. Kamala Harris talked about it in her appearance on Howard Stern. But it's 2 days later, and where's the outrage? Where's the where are people just repeating what happened and putting it on social media and making it a major issue? The problem is that we're numb. We're so much of this, we're numb, and not just numb, but there's an amnesia factor involved here too. But I guess that's what I meant about a normal country. A normal country would say that these are important issues, but we are numb and we are exhausted.
Right.
I think because there's something every single day. And in terms of my particular job, still as a journalist when I'm not teaching, I think that's important enough to point out, even if people are too numb to take it on, and even if I end up having a smaller audience, maybe because people don't want to read it on that kind of stuff on any given day. And I'm going to write a column about this tomorrow about these COVID tests. So.
In your column, you use a very personal and partisan voice. Was there something specific that made you stop the traditional reporting in a nonpartisan manner and sort of turn towards opinion?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have to my career arc was that I was what is called a straight reporter for decades, really, and for the first, starting in 1988, which is when I wrote my first political stuff for the Inquirer, from 1988 to 2004, which is 16 years, doing the math, I was a straight reporter, no opinion, and I had to kind of, I was trained to sort of remove myself in that sense and be dispassionate. But I got to the point after 16 years where I felt I knew enough about politics, I knew enough about how these people, strategized, where I really wanted to have more of my own voice because I always liked writing with style. So that's why I moved to commentary, because I felt at that point that I had earned enough experience to be able to sort of say what I thought was really going on. And that's obviously a little bit tricky for some readers, because then you get people who really get angry with your point of view. But I was fine with that, and I still am. And so I've been writing commentary ever since. And obviously it is partisan in the sense that, I think, one side is more correct than the other side. But as I try to emphasize, I really, really believe this, that I don't see this as Democrat versus Republican. I see this as facts and truth versus untruths and lies. And to me, that is the dividing line. And if it's partisan, to say that factual reality should be the priority, and if it's partisan, to say that lies are wrong, then I guess that makes me a partisan.
Got it. In 1988, you wrote The Making of an Image for The Inquirer about the GOP's pioneering TV attack ads. How has the role of political journalism changed during your lifetime along this evolving media landscape, and how do you see it going in the future?
The ads in 1988 and that whole campaign, it really, I think, further diminished at least print political journalism. And we were writing about what was going on TV all the time. But that was really the beginning of the change. And with the internet came the explosion of media sites that everybody could start to really silo themselves with sites that perhaps spoke to their own political preconceptions. Right. And so the old gatekeepers, which was New York Times, Washington Post, maybe Wall Street Journal, somewhat the LA Times, ABC, NBC, CBS, those were the main gatekeepers. Well, their impact started to really diminish. And that fragmentation has accelerated ever since to where we are today. What Kamala Harris has done this week was a perfect example of what I'm talking about, that the mainstream outlets, they all want interviews with her, which basically it's like, we're the professional journalists, we know the most about issues, you've got to be talking to us. No, they're not. She's not talking to them. She's talking to these, podcasts like, the one today.
Call Her Daddy.
Call Her Daddy, and Howard Stern, and The View on TV. So these niche audiences, late night TV, late night talk shows, these are where they think they can get a pool of voters who, potential voters who may stay home, or maybe they're gettable, maybe they're persuadable. Whereas most of the people who read mainstream print media in particular, they already know politics really well. They've made up their minds a long time ago. So that she's decided it's a waste of time to go to them because you've got all these other outlets.
And lastly, what advice do you have for students ahead of this upcoming election?
Well, two things. First is we are flooded with disinformation like never before. And I think it's imperative for everybody, Penn students especially, to guard against being swept away by lies and stuff that is just meant to sort of pollute the atmosphere, pollute the media ecosystem. And, look at the fact-checking websites, of which there are 3 or 4, including factcheck.org here at Penn. And politifact.com is another one. But that's one of the things that everybody needs to guard against, to be good citizens. But the second thing is that there is still time, if you haven't done it, to register to vote in Pennsylvania, as opposed to where your parents live. For example, this is, just as we started this conversation, this is arguably the ultimate swing state in this election. And every vote will count. I'm not going to say how you should vote, but there's maybe 2 or 3 weeks left to register and get a mail-in ballot, if that's easier. But this is the most important election of my lifetime, and since I've been around a lot longer than you guys, it is certainly the most important election of your lifetime. So let's make it work.
All right, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody watching. If you want to check out some of Dick Polman's writing, you can find it at dickpolman.net. Thank you.